Li Taiho stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately knew he was in trouble. The floor beneath his feet felt strange and cold. Everything around him glowed with a soft blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air tasted different too, like metal mixed with something sweet that made his nose wrinkle. He had never seen anything like the Galactic Military Academy before. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed gently with their own heartbeat. Strange. Symbols floated in the air, changing colors as they moved. The ceiling was so high that he could not see where it ended. Just darkness that stretched up forever. But it was not the building that made Taiho feel so out of place. It was the other students. A group of tall, thin beings walked past him. Their skin looked like blue glass, and when they moved, tiny musical sounds came from their bodies. They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. One of them turned toward Taiho, and he saw that where eyes should be, there were two bright lights that sparkled like stars. The being made a sound like wind chimes, but Taiho somehow knew it was not friendly. "This looked," the being said, imperfect. Human speech, though its mouth did not move the right way. The primitive has arrived. Taiho felt his face grow hot, but he kept walking. His grandmother had always told him that showing anger too quickly was a mistake. "Let them see who you really are first," she used to say. Near the main hall, Taiho saw more alien students. A massive creature sat in the corner, easily 3 times taller than any human. Its skin looked like gray stone, and its arms were as thick as tree trunks. 4 yellow eyes, each the size of dinner plates, watched everything around it. When it breathed, the sound was like distant thunder. On the other side of the room, something that looked like a giant insect cleaned its face. With hands that bent in too many directions, its head was covered in what looked like tiny mirrors, all reflecting different colors. 6 legs kept it perfectly balanced as it moved, and Taiho could hear a constant clicking sound coming from somewhere inside its body. In the middle of all this strangeness, Taiho felt very small and very human. His plain gray uniform looked boring, next to the natural armor and glowing skin of his new classmates. His brown hair and dark eyes seemed dull compared to the lights and colors that surrounded him. But he was here for a reason. Earth had fought hard to get this chance. For the first time in almost 1,000 years, the Galactic Military Academy had agreed to accept a human student. Not because they wanted to, but because Earth had something they needed. Taiho did not know what that something was, but he knew that everyone back home was counting on him to succeed. The main doors opened with a sound like singing glass, and all the students began moving toward the Great Hall. Taiho followed, trying not to stare at the incredible things around him. The hall was enormous, with rows of seats that seemed to float in the air without anything holding them up. Each seat was different, designed for whatever kind of being would sit in it. Taiho found his seat in the back row. It was the only one that looked normal, just a simple chair made of some kind of metal. As he sat down, he noticed that every other student was now looking at him. Some seemed curious, others looked annoyed, and a few appeared to be laughing, though with aliens it was hard to tell. At the front of the hall, a platform began to rise from the floor. Standing on it was the strangest being Taiho had seen yet. It had 6 arms, each ending in hands that had too many fingers. Its head was long and narrow, with 4 large eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Patches of skin all over its body glowed with different colors that changed as Taiho watched. "Welcome, cadets, to survival training," the being said. Its voice came from everywhere at once, filling the huge hall perfectly. "I am Commander Zilth, and I will be testing whether you are worthy of the academy." The commander's 4 eyes seemed to look at every student at the same time. "In 3 days, you will be taken to Kalox Prime. This planet will test everything you have learned. The air will try to kill you. The ground will burn your feet. The water will poison you if you are foolish enough to drink it." Excited sounds came from all around the hall. The glass-skinned beings chimed like bells. The stone giant rumbled with what might have been pleasure. The insect creature clicked faster. "Your mission is simple," Commander Zilth continued. "Reach the extraction point within 7 solar cycles. Those who fail will be removed from the academy immediately." One of the glass beings raised a thin arm. "Commander, what equipment will we receive?" Excellent question, Cadet Shrilai. The commander's glowing patches turned bright green. Each of you will receive a complete survival package. Atmospheric processors to clean the poison air. Temperature regulators to protect you from heat and cold. Nutrition synthesizers to create food from base elements. Terrain mappers to guide your path. Communication arrays to call for help. Emergency shelters rated for Class 7 hostile environments. Tai-Ho felt his stomach drop. That was technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. He had trained for. This moment his whole life, but all his training had been with simple tools and basic techniques. Each package, the commander continued, is worth more than most planets spend on defense in a full cycle. They represent the finest survival technology in the galaxy. The excitement in the hall grew stronger. Students began talking to each other in their various languages, the sounds mixing together like some impossible orchestra. Equipment distribution begins now, Commander Zilth announced. When your name is called, come forward to receive your survival package. One by one, students walked to the front of the hall. Each received a sleek case that hummed with power. Tai-Ho watched as Shrilai, the glass being who had called him primitive, accepted her case with what looked like reverence. The massive stone creature, whose name was Vex, needed 2 cases because of his size. The insect, being called Boomka, clicked happily as she examined her equipment. Finally, only one name remained. Cadet Lee Tai-Ho. Every eye in the hall turned to watch as Tai-Ho walked down the long aisle. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. When he reached the platform, Commander Zilth looked down at him with all 4 eyes. Cadet Tai-Ho, the commander said, and Tai-Ho could hear something strange in its voice. I regret to inform you that your equipment package has suffered a malfunction. The commander held up an empty pack, old and worn compared to the gleaming cases the others had received. Academy protocol allows you to withdraw from the exercise, Commander Zilth continued. No shame would be attached to such a decision. Given the circumstances, the hall was completely quiet now. Tai-Ho could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, waiting to see what the human would do. Some probably expected him to quit. Others might have wanted him to fail from the beginning. Tai-Ho took the empty pack and put it on his shoulders. It felt familiar, like the one his grandfather had used when they went camping in the mountains. No, sir, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. I will complete the mission. Commander Zilth's glowing patches shifted to a color Tai-Ho had not seen before, something between purple and gold. Very well, Cadet. We shall see what humans are truly made of. As Tai-Ho walked back to his seat, he heard whispers starting all around him. The other students were already making bets about how quickly the human would fail. Some thought he would not even survive the first day. Others gave him slightly more credit and predicted he might last until the second day before calling for rescue. But Tai-Ho was not thinking about failure. He was thinking about his grandmother's hands as she showed him how to make fire with just sticks and dry grass. He was remembering his grandfather's lessons about finding water and reading the land. He was thinking about 10,000 years of human ancestors who had survived ice ages and droughts and floods with nothing but their wits and their will to live. The empty pack on his shoulders did not feel like a disadvantage anymore. It felt like freedom. 3 days later, Tai-Ho would discover just how right he was. The transport ship shook as it entered Kalox Prime's atmosphere. Tai-Ho pressed his face against the small window and watched the planet grow larger below them. What he saw made his stomach feel heavy with worry. The ground looked like it was covered in giant wounds. Deep cracks ran everywhere, filled with liquid that glowed an angry red color. Strange towers of rock stuck up from the surface like broken teeth. In some places, huge clouds of yellow gas shot up from holes in the ground, reaching high into the dark sky. Beautiful, is it not? Said Vex, the massive stone-skinned alien sitting across from him. The giant's 4 yellow eyes were bright with excitement. A true test of survival skills. Shrilai, the glass being, made her wind chime sounds. My people conquered 12 worlds worse than this. Kalox Prime will be simple. Boomka clicked her agreement, her mirror-covered head reflecting the red light from outside. Hive memories contain data on similar environments. Success is assured, Tai-Ho said nothing. He was too busy watching the planet and thinking. The red liquid in the cracks was probably acid. The yellow gas looked poisonous. The rocks were sharp enough to cut through normal boots. And somewhere in all that mess, he had to survive for 7 days with nothing but an empty pack. The ship landed with a bump that rattled everyone's teeth. The loading door opened with a hiss, and immediately the smell hit them. It was like rotten eggs mixed with burning metal and something sweet that made Tai-Ho want to throw up. Atmospheric composition confirmed as hostile, announced the ship's computer. Temperature range from -40 to +60 degrees. It's a rain probability, 87%. Toxic gas concentration, lethal to most known life forms. The other cadets began activating their equipment. Vex pulled on armor that covered his massive body like a second skin. Lights blinked on all over it, and Tai-Ho could hear a quiet humming. Sound Shrilai touched a small device on her chest, and immediately a shimmering bubble appeared around her.
Ow.
Inside the bubble, the air looked clean and safe. Boomka pressed something on her belt, and her whole body was covered in a thin film that sparkled like oil on water. "Good luck, human," Shrilai said, though her musical voice did not sound like she meant it. "Try not to die too quickly. A gate would be embarrassing for the Academy." One by one, the aliens walked off the ship and onto the hostile planet. Their equipment made them look confident and strong. Vex bounced across the sharp rocks like they were soft grass. Shrilai floated slightly. Above the ground, her protective bubble keeping her safe from everything. Boomka moved with perfect balance, her suit protecting her from every danger. Then it was Tai-Ho's turn. He stepped off the ship, wearing nothing but his basic uniform and a simple breathing mask that would filter the air for maybe 2 days if he was lucky. The heat hit him first, making sweat break out all over his body. Then came the cold, as a wind carrying ice crystals cut through his clothes. The ground under his feet was sharp and uneven, and he could feel it trying to cut through his boots. The transport ship closed its door and lifted off, leaving him alone on the surface of Kalox Prime. In the distance, he could see the other cadets already moving toward their goal. Their equipment made them fast and safe. Vex was jumping from rock to rock like a giant metal frog. Shrilai was flying in her bubble, moving in a straight line toward the extraction point. Boomka was climbing up the side of a cliff, her suit giving her perfect grip. Tai-Ho looked around at the nightmare landscape. Everything here wanted to kill him. The air would poison his lungs. The ground would cut his feet. The acid pools would burn his skin. The gas vents would choke him. And he had nothing but his own brain and hands to keep himself alive. But instead of feeling scared, Tai-Ho felt something else. Something his grandfather had taught him during their camping trips in the mountains. When everything looks impossible, stop trying to fight the whole problem at once. Break it down into small pieces you can handle. First piece? He needed shelter before the temperature dropped again. Tai-Ho walked to the nearest rock formation and began studying it. The rocks were sharp, but they were also layered in a way that reminded him of the stone walls his great-grandfather had built on the family farm. Between 2 large rocks, he found a space that was protected from the wind. It was not much, but it was a start. Second piece. He needed to understand what he was working with. He knelt down next to one of the acid pools. It was not pure acid. He realized it was mud mixed with something that made it dangerous. But mud was something he understood. His grandmother had taught him to work with clay when he was small. She had shown him how different types of earth could be shaped and hardened, carefully, using a piece of torn cloth to protect his hands. Tai-Ho scooped up some of the mud from the edge of the pool where it was less dangerous. It felt different from normal mud, heavier and warmer. But when he squeezed it, it held its shape. When he rolled it between his palms, it became smooth. Third piece, he needed materials. The strange plants growing in the cracks between rocks looked dead. But when Tai-Ho examined them closely, he saw they were just very tough. Their fibers were strong and flexible. The roots went deep into the rock, which meant they knew how to find water. Their leaves were thick and waxy, which meant they could protect against acid and poison. While the other cadets raced toward their goal, using their advanced technology, Tai-Ho began to work with his hands. He gathered the fibrous plants testing, each one to see how strong it was. He collected different types of mud, learning which ones held together and which ones crumbled. He found rocks that were sharp enough to cut with and rocks that were flat enough to build with. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky an even darker red, Taiho had made his first discovery. The alien planet was not just trying to kill him. It was also trying to give him everything he needed to survive. He just had to be smart enough to see it. The temperature was dropping fast. In the distance, he could see the lights from the other Cadets' equipment glowing like stars. They were probably warm and comfortable inside their high-tech shelters, eating food from their synthesizers, drinking pure water from their processors. Taiho looked at his small pile of mud and plants and rocks. It did not look like much compared to their amazing technology. But his grandmother had always said that the best tools were the ones you made yourself, because you understood exactly how they worked. He began shaping the mud into bricks, mixing it with the plant fibers to make it stronger. Each brick was small enough to handle easily, but large enough to make progress. As he worked, the mud began to harden in the cold air. By the time full darkness came, he had built a small wall that would protect him from the wind. It was not much, but it was a beginning. The other cadets had disappeared into the distance, confident that their equipment would carry them to victory. But Taiho was not worried about them anymore. He was thinking about his next problem, how to make fire in a place where everything was wet with acid and the air was full of poison gas. As he settled down behind his small mud wall, Taiho smiled. His grandfather had taught him to make fire in the rain. His grandmother had shown him how to work with difficult materials. His parents had raised him to solve problems instead of giving up. The alien planet was dangerous, but it was not more dangerous than 10,000 years of human history. And every one of his ancestors had faced impossible odds with nothing but their brains, in their hands, and their refusal to quit. Tomorrow, he would show this planet what humans were really made of. Taiho woke up on his second day alive. This was already more than some people had expected. His small mud shelter had kept him warm through the freezing night, and his simple breathing filter was still working. Outside, he could hear the planet trying to kill him with acid rain and poisonous wind, but he was still breathing. He crawled out of his shelter and looked around. The landscape looked even worse in daylight. The acid rain had made new holes in the ground, and fresh clouds of yellow gas were rising from cracks in the rocks. In the distance, he could see flashes of light where the other cadets were using their equipment, but something was different about those lights. They were not moving as fast as yesterday. In fact, one of them seemed to be stuck in the same place. Taiho began working on his second day problems. First, he needed water that would not kill him. The rain was acid, the pools were poison, and the gas vents were deadly. But his grandfather had taught him that water was everywhere if you knew how to look for it. He examined the strange plants more carefully. Their roots went deep into the rocks, which meant they were finding water somewhere. When he carefully cut one of the thick stems, a small amount of clear liquid dripped out. He touched it to his tongue very carefully, ready to spit it out if it burned. It tasted bitter and strange, but it did not hurt him. That was a start. But he needed more water than the plants could give him. Looking at the acid pools, Taiho had an idea that seemed crazy but might work. Acid was just water mixed with dangerous chemicals. If he could separate them, he might be able to get clean water. He spent the morning building a distillation system using rocks, mud, and pieces of his torn uniform. It was based on something his chemistry teacher had shown his class. Years ago, the idea was simple. Heat up the dirty water until it became steam. Then cool the steam back into clean water, leaving the dangerous chemicals behind. The hardest part was making fire. Everything on this planet was wet with acid or covered in poisonous chemicals. But Taiho remembered camping with his father in the rain. Even wet wood could burn if you found the right pieces and gave them enough help. He found some of the plant fibers that were drier than others, protected inside the stems. Using 2 pieces of the hardest rock he could find, he struck sparks until one landed on the dry fiber. It took almost an hour of careful work, but finally he had a small flame. Once he had fire, everything else became easier. He could heat water, cook food, and stay warm. His distillation system worked slowly, but it worked. Drop by drop, Clean water collected in a cup he had shaped from clay and hardened in his fire. While his water system worked, Tai-ho built a better shelter. The mud bricks from yesterday had become as hard as stone in the cold night air. Today, he made more bricks, each one a little better than the last. He learned how much plant fiber to mix in to make them stronger. He figured out how to shape them so they fit together perfectly. By afternoon, he had a shelter that was bigger and stronger than anything he had ever built before. It had a good roof to keep out the acid rain, walls thick enough to stay warm, and even a chimney to carry away smoke from his fire. That was when Shirley found him. The glass-skinned alien appeared over a ridge, moving much more slowly than she had the day before. Her protective bubble was flickering on and off like a broken light. Her normally bright glow was dim and weak. She stopped when she saw Tai-ho's camp and stared. Where yesterday there had been nothing but a small mud wall, now there was a real shelter with smoke rising from a proper chimney. Clean water dripped steadily from his distillation system. It was cooking over a well-made fire. "How?" she said in her musical voice, but now it sounded tired and confused. Tai-ho looked up from where he was weaving a basket from plant fibers. "How what? How are you alive?" Shirley moved closer, her bubble popping and reforming around her. "My atmospheric processor has been failing since yesterday. My shelter unit will not activate. My food synthesizer is producing poison." She looked at his simple camp with something like wonder. "Your technology should not work. It is too primitive." Tai-ho offered her clean water in a cup he had made from clay and hardened in his fire. She stared at it like it might explode. "ID is not technology," he said. "It is just making things work with what you have." Shirley touched the water carefully with one glass finger. When it did not hurt her, she drank a little. Her glow became slightly brighter. "My people have forgotten such methods," she said quietly. "We have had machines to do everything for us for thousands of years." "Then you are in trouble," Tai-ho said, not trying to be mean but just stating a fact, because your machines are breaking down, and the planet does not care how advanced your people are. He showed her how to wrap herself in cloth he had treated with certain muds. The treated fabric would protect her glass-like skin from the acid in the air. It was not as good as her bubble shield, but it would keep her alive. "Why are you helping me?" Shirley asked as he worked. "Your people and mine are not friends. I called you primitive." Tai-ho shrugged. "My grandmother always said that keeping other people alive keeps you alive too. And besides," he smiled, "you are not primitive. You are just used to having your thinking done for you by machines." As the day went on, they heard explosions in the distance. Bex's powered armor was having problems. The massive alien's jumps were getting shorter and more clumsy. Sometimes his armor would spark and smoke, and he would have to stop and wait for it to cool down. Boomka was having different problems. Her perfect climbing suit had developed holes, and the acid air was getting inside. She was still moving toward the extraction point, but she was moving very slowly and stopping often to rest. "Their equipment is failing," Shirley observed, watching. "The distant lights. Why is your equipment working better?" "Because it is not equipment," Tai-ho explained as he added more fuel to his fire. "Equipment breaks down. Skills do not break down. Knowledge does not run out of power. Understanding does not need repair." He pointed to his shelter, his water system, his fire, his tools. "Everything here I made from things that were already. On this planet, the planet cannot break its own materials. It cannot poison its own plants. It cannot stop its own rocks from being useful." Shirley was quiet for a long time, thinking about this. Her people had conquered worlds with their technology, but they had forgotten how to work with their hands. They had machines that could do anything, but when the machines failed, they were helpless. "Teach me," she said finally. So Tai-ho taught her. He showed her how to tell which plants were safe and which ones were dangerous. He taught her how to shape mud and clay into useful things, explained how fire worked, and how to keep it burning, even in the acid rain. Shirley was a fast learner. Her glass-like fingers were actually very good at detailed work once she learned how to use them. By evening, she had made her own cup and her own small shelter next to his. "This is strange," she said as they sat by the fire, watching the stars come out. I feel more capable now than I did with all my equipment. That is, because you are more capable, Taiho said. Yesterday, you were just a passenger in your machines. Today, you are actually doing things yourself. In the distance, they could see the lights of the other cadets' equipment getting dimmer and more scattered. Vex had stopped moving completely. Hours ago, Boomka was moving in circles, her navigation system apparently broken. They will not make it to the extraction point, Srilai said sadly. Maybe they will, Taiho said, but not with their machines. Only if they learn to work with their hands and their brains instead of depending on technology to do everything for them. As they settled down to sleep in their mud brick shelters, Srilai asked one more question. Where did your people learn to do all this? Taiho smiled in the darkness. We learned it by surviving. For millions of years, humans had nothing but mud and rocks and fire and their own intelligence. We learned to make everything we needed from whatever we could find. We had to, or we would have died out long ago. And you still remember how? Some of us do. My family made sure I learned the old ways, just in case I ever needed them. I guess they were right. The next morning would bring new challenges. But for the first time since arriving on Kalox Prime, Taiho was not worried. He had proven that human ways worked even on an alien world. More importantly, he had learned that helping others was not a weakness. It was the strongest thing any person could do. On the third day, Taiho woke up to the sound of someone crying. It was a deep rumbling sound, like rocks falling down a mountain. Outside his shelter, he found Vex sitting on the ground with his massive head in his hands. The great stone warrior's armor was completely dead. What had been shining metal yesterday was now just heavy, useless weight. Vex had carried it for hours before finally giving up and dropping it beside a cluster of sharp rocks. Without his armor, the giant alien looked smaller and much more vulnerable. Ancestors will be ashamed, Vex said when he saw Taiho approaching. I am Gorathon. We are supposed to be the strongest warriors in the galaxy. But I cannot even walk across a hostile planet without machines to help me. Taiho studied the big alien carefully. Vex's stone-like skin was actually an advantage on this planet. The acid rain barely hurt him, and the sharp rocks could not cut. Through his natural armor? But the giant had been depending on his powered armor for so long that he had forgotten what his own body could do. You do not need machines to be strong, Taiho said. You just need to remember what strength really is. He showed Vex around his camp, which had grown larger and more complex each day. The shelter was now big enough for several people, with different rooms for sleeping, working, and storing supplies. His water distillation system had been improved with better filters made from sand and charcoal. His fire was contained in a proper hearth, built from carefully shaped stones. But what impressed Vex most was the workshop area. Taiho had created tools from shaped and hardened mud, knives from sharp stones, and measuring devices from straight sticks and stretched plant fibers. Everything was simple, but everything worked perfectly. Your people make tools from nothing, Vex said, picking up a hammer Taiho had made by attaching a heavy rock to a wooden handle with woven plant fibers. We make tools from everything, Taiho corrected. We just see things differently than you. He handed Vex a large digging stick he had made from one of the stronger plant stems. Try this. Your hands are much stronger than mine. You could make tools that I could never create. Vex took the digging stick and tested it. With his massive strength, he could drive it deep into the hard ground with no effort at all. Soon he was digging a drainage ditch around the camp to keep acid rainwater from collecting near their shelters. This is good work, Vex said with surprise in his voice. I had forgotten that my hands could build things instead of just breaking them. While Vex worked on improving the camp's defenses, Srilai helped Taiho with more delicate tasks. Her glass-like fingers were perfect for weaving baskets and shaping small clay pots. She had learned quickly how to work with the planet's materials, and her natural precision made her very good at detailed work. That afternoon, they heard a buzzing sound getting closer. Boomka appeared over a hill, flying in short bursts with wings that sparked and smoked. Her navigation system had been leading her in circles for 2 days. Her suit was falling apart piece by piece. She crash-landed near their camp, her compound eyes reflecting their fire as she looked around in amazement. Where 3 days ago? There had been empty wasteland. Now, there was a small but thriving settlement. This is impossible, Boomka clicked, her voice full of confusion. Primitive technology cannot create such efficiency. Taiho looked at what they had built together and tried to see it through her eyes. Their shelters were perfectly positioned to protect from wind and collect rainwater. Their fire provided heat, light, and cooking power while the smoke carried away safely through stone chimneys. Their water system turned the planet's poison into clean drinking water. Their workshop could create any tool they needed from local materials. It did not look primitive anymore. It looked like a place where people could live comfortably even on this hostile world. It is not primitive, Taiho said, offering Boomka some cooked food from their fire. It is just different. Your people learned to master energy and technology. Mine learned to work with whatever we found around us. Boomka examined the food carefully with several of her senses before eating. It was better than anything her broken synthesizer had produced. How do you know it is safe? Testing, Taiho explained. Start with very small amounts. Watch for bad reactions. Learn which plants grow near water and which ones grow near poison. Study what the local life eats. Build knowledge piece by piece. He showed her his notebook, filled with drawings and observations about the planet's plants, rocks, weather patterns, and dangerous areas. Every page showed something he had learned through careful observation and testing. My people would call this slow and inefficient, Boomka said, but she sounded thoughtful rather than critical. Maybe Taiho agreed, but it works when the fast, efficient technology breaks down. Once you learn something this way, you never forget it. As they worked together to expand the camp, Taiho told them about human history. He explained how his ancestors had survived ice ages with nothing but stone tools and fire. How they had crossed oceans in wooden boats guided only by stars. How they had built great cities starting with nothing but mud bricks and determination. Your species survived by adaptation, Srila said, her musical voice full of new understanding. We survived by making the impossible possible with whatever we had, Taiho said. When we needed to cross water, we learned to build boats. When we needed to stay warm, we learned to make fire. When we needed food, we learned to grow crops. Every problem became a chance to learn something new. Vex nodded his massive head. The Gorathan way is to overcome obstacles with strength, but you overcome obstacles by understanding them. Both ways work, Taiho said diplomatically, but understanding usually lasts longer than just overpowering something. By the fourth day, their camp had become something special. Vex had used his strength to build stone walls and furniture that would last for years. Srila had created beautiful and functional items from clay and plant fibers. Boomka had organized their supplies with mathematical precision and designed systems for storing food and water efficiently, and Taiho had taught them all to see the planet not as an enemy trying to kill them, but as a source of everything they needed to live well. Other changes were happening too. The three aliens were working together in ways that would have been impossible back at the Academy. Gorathanans, Velthari, and Thulans had been political enemies for centuries. But when you were building a fire together, or working to improve everyone's shelter, old conflicts start to seem silly. We should move toward the extraction point tomorrow, Shirley said, as they sat around their fire on the fourth evening. We have only 3 days left. Are you sure you want to leave all this? Vex asked, looking around at their comfortable camp. Taiho smiled. We can build another camp anywhere we need one. That is the point. Once you understand how things work, you can make them work anywhere. Boomka's compound eyes reflected the firelight. The Academy teaches us to depend on our equipment, but you have taught us to depend on our minds and hands. Both have their place, Taiho said. But if you only know how to use tools that other people made, you become helpless when those tools break. If you know how to make your own tools, you are never helpless. As they prepared to sleep, Vex asked the question that had been bothering him all day. Why did you help us? We are supposed to be competing against each other. You could have let us fail and won the exercise easily. Taiho thought about his grandmother's words and his father's lessons and everything his Family had taught him about what it meant to be human. Because winning by letting others fail is not really winning, he said finally. It is just being the last one to lose. Real winning is when everyone succeeds together. The three aliens were quiet for a long time, thinking about this idea that was completely new to them. Tomorrow, they would begin the journey to the extraction point. But they would not be the same cadets who had landed on this planet 4 days ago. They had learned something that no academy course could teach them, that the greatest technology was not in any machine, but in the ability to work together and never give up. On the 5th day, the sky turned black. Tejo woke up to a sound like the planet screaming. Outside their shelter, the wind was moving faster than he had ever seen wind move before.
Lightning crashed down from clouds that looked like they were
made of acid and poison. Air itself seemed to be trying to tear everything apart. Storm system approaching, Boomka announced, reading the natural signs she had learned from Tejo. Duration estimated at 12 hours minimum, electromagnetic. Interference will disable any remaining equipment. Through the chaos outside, they could see the last lights of alien technology flickering and dying across the landscape. Whatever equipment had still been working was now completely useless. Anyone caught in the open with only machines to protect them would not survive. But Tejo's camp was ready. Over the past 4 days, they had built something that could stand up to anything the planet could throw at them. The shelters were made of mud brick walls, thick enough to stop acid rain and strong enough to resist the strongest winds. The roofs were built at angles that would shed water away from their living spaces. The chimneys were designed to draw smoke out even when the wind was howling. This human technology is impossible, Vex muttered, as he watched their walls stand firm against wind that was bending metal. Mud and rocks should not be stronger than powered armor. It is not stronger, Tejo explained as he checked their water storage and food supplies. It is just designed differently. Your armor was built to do many things, so it was not perfect at any one thing. These walls were built to do one job very well: keep us safe from storms. The storm hit with a fury that made their previous challenges look easy. Acid rain came down so hard it sounded like rocks hitting their roof. Lightning struck so close that the thunder shook their teeth. The wind screamed around their shelters, looking for any weakness it could find. Inside, 4 cadets were warm and dry and safe. Shrilai worked on weaving storm cloaks from plant fibers that Tejo had shown her how to treat with natural oils. The treated fibers would shed acid rain and resist tearing in high winds. Her glass-like fingers moved quickly and precisely, creating garments that were both beautiful and practical. Vex used his strength to reinforce their shelters from the inside, adding support beams made from the strongest local wood and checking every joint and connection. His powerful hands could sense stress in the structure that smaller beings would miss. Boomka organized their supplies with mathematical efficiency, calculating exactly how much food and water they would need to reach the extraction point and planning the most efficient route to get there. Her compound eyes could see patterns and connections that helped her solve complex problems, and Tejo kept the fire burning. It seemed like a simple job, but it was actually the most important one. The fire provided heat to keep them warm, light to work by, and hot air to keep their chimney drawing properly. Without the fire, their shelter would become cold and damp and dangerous. With it, they had a comfortable home even in the worst storm the planet could create. "How did you know this storm was coming?" Shrilai asked as she worked on her weaving. Tejo pointed to his notebook, where he had been recording weather patterns since the first day. The gas vents changed color yesterday. The acid pools started bubbling differently. The plants closed their leaves tighter. Everything was getting ready for something big. "Your people learned to read natural signs," Boomka observed. "Most species develop technology to predict weather instead." "Both ways work," Tejo said, adding more fuel to the fire. "But natural signs never need power or maintenance. The planet always tells you what it is going to do, if you know how to listen." As the storm raged outside, Tejo told them more stories about human survival. Talked about his ancestors who had lived through hurricanes and tornadoes and blizzards, with nothing but their wits and their will to live. He explained how humans had learned to read the sky and the wind and the behavior of animals to predict what weather was coming. Your species has survival knowledge going back thousands of generations, Vex said with something like awe in his deep voice. Every species does, Taiho replied. You just forgot yours when you started depending on machines to do your thinking for you. He helped each of them remember stories from their own people's past. Vex told tales of ancient Gorathon warriors who had survived in the mountains with nothing but their strength and courage. Shrilai sang old Velthri songs about reading the patterns of light and sound that revealed hidden truths. Boomka shared Thulin memories of hive builders who could create complex structures using only simple tools and perfect cooperation. We have all forgotten our beginnings, Shrilai said sadly, gave up our natural abilities to become dependent on artificial ones. You did not give them up, Taiho corrected. You just stopped using them. They are still there, waiting for you to remember. The storm continued through the night, but inside their shelter, it felt almost cozy. Their fire crackled warmly. The walls kept out all the noise and danger. Their food was good, and their water was clean. They had everything they needed. They had made it all themselves with their own hands and minds. But the most important thing they had was something none of them had expected to find: friendship. 4 different species who had been taught to see each other as competitors or enemies were now working together like they had known each other all their lives. They shared food and stories and laughter. They helped each other with difficult tasks. They made sure everyone was comfortable and safe. This is strange, Boomka said as she adjusted their supply calculations. I feel more connected to you 3 than I do to most members of my own species. That is because we have been through real challenges together, Taiho explained. When you depend on each other to survive, you stop caring about what species someone is. You only care about whether they are reliable and kind and willing to help. Vex nodded his massive head. In the old stories, Gorathon warriors always fought alone. But this way is better. Together we are stronger than any of us could be. Separately, as the storm finally began to weaken on the morning of the 6th day, they prepared to make their final push to the extraction point. They packed supplies in waterproof containers made from treated plant materials. They put on the storm cloaks Shrilai had woven. They gathered the tools they would need for the journey, but before they left, they took one last look at the camp they had built together. It was not just a survival shelter anymore. It was proof that intelligence and cooperation and hard work could overcome any challenge. It was a home they had created from nothing but mud and determination. We should destroy it, Boomka said practically. Leave no trace for the next group of cadets, Novek said firmly. Let it stand. Let others see what is possible when people work together. Taiho smiled as he shouldered his pack. It was still the same empty pack he had been given at the academy, but now it was full of tools he had made, and supplies he had gathered, and knowledge he had earned. Ready? He asked. The 3 aliens looked at each other and then at him. Were not the same beings who had landed on this planet 6 days ago. They were stronger, smarter, and more capable than they had ever been in their lives. Ready, they said together. Tomorrow they would reach the extraction point. But they would not be returning to the academy as failures who had been saved by their equipment. They would be returning as graduates of a much harder school. The school that taught you to survive with nothing but your own mind and hands, and the help of true friends. The extraction point was a flat area of ground marked by 4 tall metal posts. When the rescue shuttle arrived exactly on time, its pilot expected to find 4 exhausted cadets barely alive after their week-long survival test. Instead, he found something that made him report a navigation error and double-check his coordinates. At the landing zone was a small but thriving community. Tio and his 3 companions had not simply walked to the extraction point and waited. They had arrived early and immediately begun improving the area. Their experience building together had taught them to see every place as an opportunity to make something better. They had built a comfortable shelter using the metal posts as corner supports. Clean water flowed from a filtration system that turned the local acid pools into drinking water. A well-organized fire provided warmth and cooking heat. Storage areas kept their supplies dry and organized. Even the landing area had been cleared and marked to make it safer for the shuttle to land. But what truly amazed the pilot was not what they had built, but how they had built it. Every construction showed the influence of multiple species working. Together, Gorathon's strength had shaped the heavy structural elements. Velthari precision had created perfect joints and connections. Thulan organization had optimized every system for maximum efficiency. And human ingenuity had found ways to make everything work using only local materials. The shuttle landed, and Commander Zilth stepped out. The six-armed alien's glowing patches shifted through colors that indicated confusion, amazement, and something that might have been respect. "Cadets," the commander said, looking around at their achievements. "Report your status." "Mission accomplished, sir," Taiho said simply. "All personnel present and accounted for. No injuries, no equipment losses." Commander Zilth's four eyes focused on him. "No equipment losses?" "Cadet Taiho, you began this mission with no functional equipment, correct, sir?" "Still have no equipment losses to report." The commander walked through their small settlement, examining everything carefully. Every structure was solid and well-designed. Every system worked perfectly. Every innovation showed deep understanding of both engineering principles and local materials. "Explain this," Commander Zilth said, pointing to their water purification system. Taiho and his friends took turns explaining. They described how they had learned to work with the planet's natural materials instead of fighting against them. How they had combined their different species' strengths to solve problems none of them could have handled alone. How they had built not just survival shelters, but a real community. "These techniques are primitive," the commander said, but there was no criticism in the words. It was more like wonder. "Sir, with respect," Vex said in his deep, rumbling voice, "these techniques work when advanced technology fails. They work in any environment. They require no external power source and need no maintenance beyond basic care." Shrilay stepped forward, her glass-like form glowing brighter than it had since the first day. "Commander, we learned something important. Technology should serve us, not make us weak. When we depend completely on machines, we forget how to think and work with our own minds and hands." Boomkaw's compound eyes reflected the light from the shuttle. Recommendation: Academy survival training should include instruction in primitive techniques. These methods provide redundancy when advanced systems fail. Commander Zilth was quiet for a long time, walking around their settlement and examining their innovations. Finally, the alien stopped in front of Taiho. "Cadet Taiho, your performance on this exercise has been unprecedented. Not only did you complete the mission without equipment, you exceeded every parameter we measure. You demonstrated leadership, innovation, adaptability, and cooperation." The commander paused, glowing patches shifting to new colors. "More importantly, you transformed what should have been a competition into a collaboration. You helped others succeed instead of trying to win by letting them fail." Taiho felt his face growing warm, but he met the commander's gaze steadily. "Sir, I was taught that real strength comes from lifting others up, not from standing on top of them." "And where did you learn this philosophy?" "From my family, sir. From my grandmother, who taught me to work with clay and fire. From my grandfather, who showed me how to read the weather and find water. From my parents, who taught me that the most important skill is helping others succeed." Commander Zilth turned to address all four cadets. "What you have accomplished here will be studied by military strategists across the galaxy. You have proven that the oldest technologies are sometimes the most reliable. That cooperation between species can achieve what competition cannot. That intelligence and determination can overcome any obstacle." The commander gestured toward their settlement. "This represents a fundamental shift in how we think about survival and leadership. You came here as cadets from 4 different worlds who barely tolerated each other. You are leaving as a team that can survive and thrive anywhere." In the galaxy, as they gathered their few possessions to board the shuttle, Taiho looked one last time at what they had built together. It was not just mud and stone and plant fibers anymore. It was proof that the impossible was just another word for something nobody had figured out how to do yet. "It seems wrong to leave it," Shrilay said quietly. "We are not leaving it," Taiho replied. "We are taking it with us. Every skill we learned, every problem we solved, every way we helped each other, all of that comes with us wherever we go." Vex picked up a small tool he had made, a simple hammer that fit his massive hands perfectly. I want to remember how it feels to make something useful with my own strength. Boomka collected her notebooks, filled with observations and calculations, and drawings. This knowledge should be preserved and shared. Shrilay took one of the cups she had shaped from clay, beautiful and functional, and made with her own hands. I never knew I could create something like this. They boarded the shuttle together, but they were not the same for cadets who had landed on Kalox Prime 7 days earlier. They had discovered strengths they never knew they had. They had learned that the greatest technology was not in any machine, but in the ability to think clearly, work hard, and help others succeed. As the shuttle lifted off from the hostile planet, Commander Zilth filed a preliminary report that would change Academy training forever. The report included detailed descriptions of human survival techniques, recommendations for cross-species cooperation exercises, and a request for further study of what the commander termed adaptive primitivism. But the most important part of the report was a single line that would become famous throughout the galaxy. Recommend immediate revision of all survival protocols. Human Cadet Taiho has demonstrated that the most advanced survival tool is the refusal to accept that something cannot be done.
Ow.
3 months later, Taiho received a letter from Earth. His grandmother had heard about his success from the news reports that had spread across human space. Her letter was short and simple. Proud of you, grandson. Always knew you would do well when you had to make do with mud and common sense. The whole family is talking about how you showed those aliens what humans can do when we put our minds to it. Come home soon and teach me some of those new techniques you learned. Love, grandmother. Taiho smiled as he read the letter in his new quarters at the academy. Outside his window, he could see construction crews working on the new survival training complex. They were building it using a combination of advanced technology and traditional techniques, the best of both worlds. On his desk sat 4 items the hammer Vex had made, a notebook from Boomka, a clay cup from Shrilay, and his own worn pack that had carried him through the greatest challenge of his life. They were simple things, made from basic materials by hand and brain and determination, but they represented something much more important than their function. They represented the proof that any problem could be solved, any challenge could be overcome, and any goal could be achieved by people willing to work together and never give up. That Taiho reflected was the most human thing of all.